So we could start with your full name, please.
Okay. My name is Louis Joseph Cañedo, and I was born here in San Diego on March 6, 1926.
So how old does that make you today?
92.
Beautiful. And which branch of the armed service did you serve with?
In the Army.
Okay. And which units were you attached to?
When I went overseas, I was assigned to the E Company of the 381st Regiment of the 96th Infantry Division.
And what was your job within the Army?
Well, I trained here in California at Camp Roberts, which is up in Northern California, and trained as an infantryman. And our training was supposed to last about 16 weeks, but because of the problems that we're having in Europe, they reduced our training to 13 weeks because we were not sure we were going to go to Europe. But instead they sent us to the Pacific. And so actually when we actually went for additional training in Hawaii. We did some jungle training in Hawaii and also on the island of Saipan. So actually when we joined the 96, I joined as an infantryman. But during the campaign, we lost practically all of our medics. And so I was then transferred from the infantry into the medical department, but I stayed with the same company. So I was in fact, I was the only lone medic for a while there in Company E.
And at what point did you get, I guess, transferred as a medic or assigned?
Well, let's see, the invasion of Okinawa was on April 1st, which was Easter Sunday, and that was in April, and so I stayed with the campaign for about almost a month before I was transferred into the medics.
So you probably had very little training.
Very little medical training, right?
And what year did you join the Army? And what year did you serve until?
I was drafted into the Army in the month of August of 1944. And I served until, of course, the war ended. And when I was brought back to the States, I was released on late November of 1946.
And what rank did you attain?
My highest rank was buck sergeant.
And did you receive any medals?
Just the Bronze Star.
Okay, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, so let's talk about your childhood and growing up. You said you grew up in California. Did you have any siblings?
Yes, I have one older brother.
One older brother.
Yes.
Did he serve in the war as well?
No, he did not.
Okay. And tell me about your parents. What were their names?
Okay, my dad was Joseph G. Cañedo, and he was born in Mazatlan, Mexico. Okay. And my mother, Pauline, her maiden name was Martinez, and she was born in San Jose del Cabo, Baja California.
And what did your father do for work?
He was a chef. He worked many years at a resort in Tijuana, which was at that time called Agua Caliente. And then when that closed, he came back. Well, he was actually still living here and was going back and forth across the border. But after that closed, then he came to work here at the U.S. Grant, and he served there for, I think over 35 years.
And did your mother work, or was she?
Yeah, she worked part-time. In fact, there was a laundry not too far from our house, and she used to work part-time at the laundry.
Now, how much older was your brother than you?
11 years.
Okay, so there's a pretty big gap.
Yes. Well, what it was, he was he was number one. Then I had two sisters, and then I came along, and my two sisters died before I was born, so I never met them.
So were you close with your brother?
Very close, yes.
He kind of look out for you?
Yeah, yeah. He was like a first uncle, yeah.
And overall, as a family, you guys are pretty tight-knit.
Right, yes.
Okay. Did you guys struggle, growing up, living through the Great Depression? Did you
Well,
struggle?
that was really a difficult time for a lot of people. But we were lucky that my dad always had a job. And so we were never lacked for the principal things like food and clothing and so forth, because he was able to supply that. And yet I still remember, because we were raised over in Logan Heights, and many times we'd hear a knock at the back door, and there were these people that were hungry, and my mom always fed them. Yeah, there was a lot of people that really went through some real rough times.
Was your mom a pretty good cook?
Excellent cook. The ladies from Baja California are the best cooks in the world.
And what was your favorite meal, or some of your favorite meals?
Well, my mom made the best tortillas in the world.
Handmade?
Yeah, handmade flour tortillas, yes, and great beans. And the thing is, my mom, she was pretty conservative, and so consequently, when she cooked meals, she would seem to just cook enough for whoever was there. So we never had seconds. She served your plate, and that was it.
Better enjoy it.
Yeah.
Good. Well, tell me about growing up. Did you have friends in the neighborhood?
Oh yes, because we had a lot of kids who were mainly my age, and so we went to school together, and we played ball together, and all the other stuff that kids do, and we were very, very close. And the thing is now, there isn't one of those friends alive. They've all passed away. And I really miss that, because I had some really, really close friends. People that you can, maybe girls gossip more than men. I really can't say that. There's some controversy over that, but some of the friends, I could say something to them, and that's as far as it went. And the same way, if they said something to me, it died right there. It was you didn't pass it on.
Yeah. Must be tough not to have anybody to reminisce those memories with.
Right.
Yeah. And yourself, did you have any jobs early on? Did you start working?
Well, yeah. Well, as a kid, we had a paper route, and in those days you either delivered by foot or on a bicycle. And then later on, a friend of mine, we made these shoe shine boxes, and we'd go to town and shine shoes. We used to do that we did that for quite a while.
You remember what you were making at that point?
Oh, I would say that would be about 1932.
But do you remember how much money you were making at that point?
Oh, well, see, the newspapers at that time were a nickel.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the company gave you 2 cents for each paper you sold. So.
And how much would you charge for a shoe shine?
10 cents.
10 cents. And you said about six years old at this point?
Yeah, well, yeah, no, I was actually about 7 or 8.
7 or 8.
Yeah.
You don't find that nowadays.
And we used to go to an area called Horton Plaza, which is right in the middle of town. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of theaters around that area. And the popcorn vendor, he sold regular popcorn, and all the little kernels that don't pop, he used to bag them up, and he called it, what did he call it? He called it, penny scratch, or something like that term, and he sold little bags for a penny. Mm-hmm. So that's what you'd buy. If you go to the theater, you'd buy 2 or 3 of those bags of little kernels. We wouldn't buy the popcorn. The popcorn was 10 cents.
What would you do with the kernels then?
Well, you eat those.
You just eat the unpopped kernels.
Yeah, right.
Now, what else did you do with the money that you made? Did you have to give any to your parents to help out? Or?
Well, yeah. Later on, when I was doing additional work, yeah, I would give part of that to my mom, especially for groceries and stuff.
What other jobs did you take on later on?
Well, at an early age, I was able to drive truck, and so I drove a grocery for what do you call it? A grocery supply company, and supplied vegetables, fruit and vegetables to the stores. I did that for quite a while.
So you worked pretty much all throughout your childhood and adolescence?
Yes.
And up until
Yes.
And did you graduate from high school?
Yes. Well, I went to Sherman Elementary School, was the name of it. Then from there, we went to Memorial Junior High, which at that time was from 7 to 9. And then when I graduated from junior high, I went to St. Augustine High School. And the only reason I went to St. Augustine High School, because actually all my friends were going to San Diego High. That was the most popular school. But my brother had graduated from St. Augustine, so my dad insisted I go there. I didn't want to go there, and so I actually went one semester to San Diego High, and then I transferred to St. Augustine. So actually, that's where I graduated, there in June of 1944.
And so you didn't have any of your friends that you had?
No, I had to make all new friends over there.
Must have been tough. And did you play any sports, for the high school or?
Yeah, junior varsity. I never played varsity ball. Just junior varsity baseball, and that's about it.
And what positions did you play there?
I played third base.
Still follow baseball today?
Somewhat. I'm not too happy with our present team, but I do like baseball, but I prefer football to watch, especially college football.
Okay. Right. And you're referring to the Padres when you say your current team. Okay. Who's your college football team?
Notre Dame.
Notre Dame. Right. Fighting Irish.
That's right.
All right. So you graduated high school in '44. You said. Rewinding a few years to 1941, December 7th. Pearl Harbor was attacked.
Right.
Do you remember where you were?
Yeah, oh yes, very definitely. Because I was a Sunday, and at that time they used to have football games there at Balboa Stadium. And San Diego didn't have a professional team, but they had a semi-pro team called the San Diego Bombers. And they were playing, I don't forget what other team they were playing, and I was in attendance at that particular game. And being a Navy town, there was a lot of military personnel in attendance. So when the announcement came of the attack on Pearl Harbor, of course everybody was shocked. But then about 5 or 6 minutes later, came the announcement for all military to report to their stations. And pretty soon the stadium just about emptied out and at that time from Balboa Stadium, because there was no obstruction, you could see San Diego Bay. You could just see the bay there, and pretty soon you could see the ships leaving the bay. Well, what a sight that was.
So this was in the middle of the game, the announcement.
Yeah, right.
Did any of the players have to leave?
No, in fact, I think they canceled the game.
Yeah, they just stopped playing.
Yeah, right.
And did you understand what had happened? I mean, you were 15 at the time.
No, I didn't even know where Pearl Harbor was. Yeah.
It didn't seem like a substantial event.
No,
sure.
Right.
Did you later on in the next few days sort of learn?
Well, yeah, because of course we didn't have television then, and so all the news you were getting on the radio, and so then of course you hear the president's speech and so forth, and so and we were getting pretty well up to date what was happening, and then being that we were right here on the West Coast, there was all the danger that we would be attacked here, and so we had the blackouts, and in fact you had to have dark curtains on your windows, so if you had lights on at night, it wouldn't go through, and you couldn't have a porch light out, you know, and even the cars, they had to tape the headlights so there was just a small beacon showing, so people could see you coming, because you couldn't see with the lights, but they could see you coming, and so it was you know, pretty scary, because you almost thought sure that we were going to be attacked. And
it made it feel like it was imminent.
Right.
Almost.
Yes.
Interesting. So, do you remember having any conversations with your parents or your friends about kind of what was going to happen or what could happen? I'm sure your imagination kind of maybe took over a bit.
Yes, but I don't recall, you know, much discussion, because I knew eventually that I would probably have to join the service, but because I was still in junior high school at that time, and so when I was going to graduate from high school, which was on June the 6th, D-Day. Well, just before that, so my birthday was in March, so the board sent me a notice to report. So I went to the draft board and asked them if they could just postpone it till after my graduation, which was in June, and so they allowed that. So consequently, when on that day during the ceremony, it was a Catholic high school, the person giving the diplomas was Bishop Buddy, who was a bishop there at the time. And during the ceremony, I guess somebody must have went out and told him about D-Day, because he announced, he stopped the ceremony to announce the invasion of Normandy. So I thought to myself, uh-oh, here we go. So that way, I was able to graduate, before I went into service.
Interesting. So those years, 1942, 1943, and the better half of 44, you were attending school. Were you following along with what was going on with the war? Or?
Oh yes, sir. Because in fact, some of the fellows that were already 18 years old and didn't graduate, and so consequently they went in service before I did.
Some people that you knew.
Yes, right. Mm-hmm. And also then, when they called all the Japanese civilians, and since in fact I had a real good friend, Japanese boy named George, that was in fact I never saw him again.
Oh, his family was
in
the internment camps.
Right, internment.
So life for you, even though you hadn't joined the army yet, had changed pretty significantly.
Oh yes, because see, I had never left. In fact, the furthest north I'd ever been to was Los Angeles, so I had never been up to Northern California, and so when I was drafted and was sent up to Camp Roberts, well, you got people from all over the country there, and people with all these different accents, especially the Southerners, and then there's one fellow I remember, I forget, I think he was from Oklahoma, but he always had his guitar with him, and that's the first introduction I had to Western music, because he'd serenade us at night with his Western songs. And that was strange, because I had never listened to Western music before.
So tell me about when you received your draft notice. Did you get the letter? Did your mother get the letter?
No, I got it.
So did you know what it was before you
opened it? Oh, absolutely. Those were very common envelopes. Yeah.
And you said you were sort of anticipating it.
Yeah, right.
You knew it was coming.
Yeah,
eventually.
right. And that My dad took it pretty well. The one that was really upset was my mom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She didn't want you to go.
No, of course not. And the thing is, in fact, I knew some of the friends that they got the draft notice and they went to Mexico.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, they took off. And so, and I don't know whatever happened to them because if they ever came back or not, I don't know. But I told my mom, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not about to do that.
You wanted to serve your country.
That's right.
And did you have any thoughts of enlisting at that point? Because I understand you get drafted, you usually end up in the Army.
Yeah, well, I applied for at the Air Force. At that time, it was the Army Air Force, and I applied to that. I wanted to be possibly either be a pilot or navigator or something like that. So they sent me up to Los Angeles for some tests that you have to take, and I passed all the tests because they showed me the thing that I had passed all the tests, but for some reason I was rejected, and so they didn't allow me to go into the Air Force. So, and then when the first time when you go to get examined, they stamp your card of where you're going to go, and mine was stamped Navy. But when I reported it, he says, no, he says, the quota's full, you're going in the Army.
You were all over the place.
Yeah.
And did you have any reservations about joining the Army?
Oh, no, none at all, no.
Okay. So you got your draft notice in March. You requested the delay or deferment until graduation.
Right.
You graduated on what would be the invasion of Europe.
Yeah, June 6th, yeah.
And tell me what happens after that? When did you report to Camp Roberts?
Oh, like I say, I reported, I think, in August of 44, yes.
So you had a few months in between graduation.
Right, yes.
And what were you doing during that time? Just counting down the days?
Counting the days, that's about it, right.
Yeah.
And and like I said, did all of the basic training was at Camp Roberts. Mm-hmm. But then we did additional training in Hawaii and in the island of Saipan.
Mm-hmm. So your basic training, you said, was about 13 weeks.
Yeah.
It's about just over 3 months. So November, December of 44, you get shipped out to Hawaii?
Yes.
Okay. And how long were you on
We were only in Hawaii about 2 weeks, I think.
And then you're doing training there.
And then went to Saipan for about
more jungle
we were only there about 10 days or 10, 12 days.
And you mentioned earlier you thought you guys would have ended up in Europe?
Yeah, well, because seemed to be all the problems with the invasion of Normandy and all the battles going on in Europe and Africa and Italy and so forth. We thought sure we were going to go to Europe. And so it was really a surprise when they sent us up to Fort Lewis up in Washington. And so the guy's thinking, why would they send us to Fort Lewis if we're going to Europe, Because they don't tell you anything. I mean,
you're on a need-to-know basis.
Yeah, they don't tell you anything. So everybody's saying, what are we doing here? And he says, do you think they'd send us to New York somewhere? And so pretty soon we board ship out and go down the Columbia River, and we're going to the South Pacific.
It may be a silly question, but did you have a preference as to where you might end up?
No. You let them tell you what to do.
Yeah. So how long were you guys on the transport ship to Hawaii from Washington?
I would say it probably took about 7 days. Because see, the ships have to do a zigzag, so they don't do a straight thing. So it takes longer.
And you remember that week being on board and
yeah, I remember all the guys that got seasick.
Did you get seasick?
No, I didn't. I never got seasick. Never did.
Had you been on a ship before that?
Yeah, it's a small fish. I just got fishing off the coast here and everything, but never on a transport. And yeah, in fact, I still remember when we were coming down the Columbia River, which is very calm, but the minute that ship hit that first wave on the ocean, that's when I don't know how many guys got sick all at the same time. I think it works on their mind, I think.
Was it pretty crowded on board?
Oh, very crowded. Yeah, they had the bunks. I remember the bunks were about, I don't know how many, I think about 8 high. And then mine was on the bottom, and the sailor happened to be coming by, and I seen there was a white line all the way around like that. And I asked the said, "What's that line for?" "That's the water line," he tells me. The water line. So I was sleeping just below the water line.
That had to have been comforting.
Yes. Well, you don't have to worry if that torpedo hits. It's all over.
And how much room did you have in between the...
Very little. Very, like I could say, there was eight. The guy on top, I think, had a little more room.
And did you do anything to pass the time, or you just...
A lot of gambling.
Not
A lot of gambling, yeah.
poker?
Poker and mainly dice. Yeah, the guys mainly like to play dice.
Did you come out on top, or?
No. No, I wasn't very good. I wasn't a very good gambler.
So tell me about landing in Hawaii. What did you think when you got there?
Well,
Tropical island.
yeah, because never been there before, you know. And at that time, they used to grow a lot of pineapple on that, but they don't do it now. So when we got off the ship, they put us on this little narrow, very narrow boxcars, very narrow. And so we actually, taking us to the camp, we were going by all these pineapple fields. And so I don't think anybody had ever seen a pineapple before. And so when the train happened to stop at one time, the guy jumped out and he cut one of the pineapples because they were green, you know. He didn't know the difference.
It wasn't ripe yet.
No, it wasn't ripe.
Probably a little hard to chew into. So did you guys pull in? Did you guys pull into Pearl Harbor when you guys landed, or where did your ship? Where did you
Oh no! We bypassed Pearl Harbor.
You mentioned you weren't on Pearl Harbor or on Hawaii long.
No.
And then you made your way to Saipan.
Right.
Talk to me about the training that you guys.
Well, because the battles were over, yeah. But there was still a lot of enemy soldiers still in the jungles.
Caves.
Well, there weren't any caves there, but there was. We had a big field there where we set up our tents, and then there was kind of like a cliff-like thing, and the rest of it was jungle, and so sometimes either early in the morning or late afternoon, the Japanese would set up a machine gun over there and kind of. You know, the funny thing, I don't remember them ever hitting anybody, but they did fire a few rounds and then they'd take off, you know. And then there was an outfit there before us, and they'd go out there looking for them. I don't know if they ever found them because it seemed like every evening they'd pull off the same thing.
They do it just to annoy you.
Yeah, right.
So did. You guys, it was dangerous.
Oh, sure, obviously, yeah.
You know, it's pretty well secured.
Right.
But what did your training involve? You're still an infantryman at this point.
Right. And so
preparing you for the terrain and the elements and that sort of
stuff.
Yeah,
of course. Then when we left the Saipan, because we were on board ship for quite a while, and we had no idea where we were going. Not because you'd ask somebody. In fact, you asked the sailors too, and they didn't know, you know. And it so happened I happened to be on the chow line one day. And pretty soon I say, "Hey, Louis," I hear somebody calling. it was a guy that I had gone to school with. He was a quartermaster aboard that ship. So he had the keys to everything, you know. He said, come on, get out of there. He says, you don't have to stand. So I'd eat at the cruise, in the cruise quarters, which was a lot better food, you know. Then in the evening, he had the keys, and we had ice cream and all the stuff. And, in fact, he set me up in a bunk in the cruise quarters.
Oh, yeah.
So I didn't have to sleep down the hole.
Not below the water line.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, it's good to know people.
Yes, right, absolutely.
So after you made that long journey, landed on Saipan, how long were you guys there for?
Oh, I don't think we were there for only about 10 or 12 days.
And this is before you made your way to Okinawa.
Yeah, right.
So talk to me about becoming a medic.
Well, first of all, when we first landed on Okinawa, I was signed to the radio outfit.
Okay.
And in fact, the very first fellow that I ran into or met there, his name is Paul Sather. He used to live right here in El Cajon. In fact, he just died here about 2 months ago. I used to be in contact with him all the time. But he was the first guy, I mean, he was a corporal at the time. And because the sergeant in charge was really a tough guy. And as you're coming, in as a replacement, had not seen real combat before, you don't know how these veterans are gonna react to you. You know, you're kind of there, oh, what do you guys know or whatever. No, but this Paul, he treated us like we were old friends. You know, and so it was really okay. It was to get there and see some friendly face, you know. And so I was signed to that radio, and you see the radios that the fellows have now, which are little dinky things. We had these big, heavy radios with a long antenna, and so
here I am.
Yeah, right. And kind of, boy, you were a target with that thing, because the captain would always want to check out all the different platoons, and you had to be with him, you know. And that's the first time when I heard those bullets whizzing by that antenna. And I said, well, I hope they hit the antenna, nothing else.
Stay pretty low.
Yeah, right.
So you're the one carrying the backpack.
Right.
And how long did that last for?
Oh, for quite a while. Then, for some reason, I didn't have to carry that doggone radio very long, but I stayed with a company, and so when I got transferred into the medical corps, and I want to explain what really happened there.
Sure.
The fellow, one morning, he came up, and like I said, we didn't have any more medics. So the fellow comes up there, and he's got all this medical equipment with him, and he's looking for me. So I told him, yeah, I'm Louis, He says, well, I'll let you know, he says, you're our new medic. And so he handed me all the stuff. He says, but he says, I'm going to have to take your M1 rifle, and I'm going to give you a carbine. I said, no, you're not. I says, if you want this M1 rifle, then you're going to have to take your medical stuff back too, because I'm not giving up that M1. I've seen those carbines jammed too many times. So I finally convinced him that. He said, okay, so I kept my rifle. Because see, in the Pacific, the medics could carry their weapon. They couldn't do that in Europe. And in Europe, they had the red cross on their helmets, or on the armband. We couldn't do that. All the medics were just like regular soldiers, because you were a target if you were carrying that red cross on your helmet. That was a perfect target, and so you weren't allowed to do that.
Japanese played by different rules.
That's right. And so consequently, one night we had on the island of Okinawa, there were these knolls, and I don't know if they were man-made or the Japanese made them, but there were these knolls that were pretty high, and so what the platoons would do is dig their foxholes around the knolls for protection at night, because the Japanese would try to infiltrate during the night. And so this one evening, we'd already dug in and everything, and my captain, he came up to me, his name was Captain Wilcox. He says, Lou, he says, what? He says, we have 3 wounded guys in the other knoll. One of them is, 2 are walking wounded, he said, and the other one we're going to have to take him out on the litter. He says, you got to get him out of there. So I talked to these other 2 fellows. One was named Joaquin. He was from Hayward, California, and the other guy, Cartmel, he was here from San Diego. So I asked them if they would go with me, and they said, sure, okay. So we took the litter, and then I gave Joaquin just the rifle. I said, we're just taking the one weapon, you know. And so it was pitch dark. So the only time you could see anything is these flares would go out. They'd shoot off these flares, and then you could see where you were going. And then we'd crouch down while the flares were on, and as soon as they'd go out, then that's when we'd make our move. And so we actually were moving in the dark. Well, at a certain point, about halfway there, I could hear these Japanese talking right in front of us. And then I think they turned and started to talk to us, thinking that we were Japanese soldiers, because the Americans wouldn't walk around there at night. You know? So we didn't say a word. And so we finally reached the 3 wounded guys, put the one guy on the litter, and then I told Joaquin, you know what? We can't go back the same way we came, Joaquin, or we're going to run into the Japanese soldiers. I don't know how he did it, but he guided us out to back to our company in a different way. And God, you think he could see at night, because I don't know how he did it, but he's the one that guided us out. I gave him credit for that. So.
So you mentioned you guys ran out of medics.
Right.
And they'd all been killed? Or
well, just wounded, yeah, wounded. I don't think any of them were killed.
So what type of training did you have?
Basically, no, you know what? I had worked. The other guy that interviewed me one time, he kind of laughed at this, because when I was in high school, I worked at this veterinary hospital, and so at least I knew what blood looked like, you know. And so basically, I guess, I don't know how they look at your records, and because I had, that's the only medical training that you could think of that was on my records. And so that might have been it. I really don't know. I never found out really how they picked me to be the medic.
But they handed you a bunch of supplies.
Oh yeah.
Said, now
of course, I knew how to give shots and stuff like that, you know, because as a medic, you have a lot of morphine. You know, they give you a lot of, because each soldier has their own one little packet of morphine in their kit. But of course, I had a lot more supply.
So you guys landed about a week after the initial invasion.
Right, yeah.
And I understand, I don't know if it's the same for all, but a lot of the soldiers that first landed, they didn't necessarily experience any resistance.
No, not in Okinawa, no, they did not. And so, and that really, I think that really surprised the general staff, because, you know, all other islands, the defense was at the shore, and, you know, like Iwo Jima, all the Saipan, all of them. And in this one, we landed. There was 3 Army divisions landed one side, and 2 Marine divisions landed next to us, and they went north. Well, they were down at the end of the island in 3 days, because there was no resistance at all. So when we started to move, we moved up forward. Why? I think, well, I guess there's nobody here. But then there was some sporadic shooting, but nothing really of strong resistance until about almost 2 weeks later, when they really ran into their strong defenses. That's when hell broke loose. Yeah.
And can you talk about your first experience, your first days in combat?
Well, you know, they assign you to, you have a particular platoon, and then each platoon has so many squads. There was about 3 or 4 squads in each platoon.
Mm-hmm.
So I was assigned to one particular squad, and so that was my first experience when they had to go on a patrol.
Mm-hmm.
And not having been on a patrol before, because the sergeant in charge, he was a real tall guy. I think he was an ex-baseball player, because I think he ended up playing here on the Pacific Coast League. And he was a real tall guy, and he was the head guy. So I would just watch him, and I said, whatever he does is what I'm going to do. If he looked to the right, I look to the right. If he looked to the left, I would look to the left, because this guy had a lot of experience, and so you had to follow somebody like that.
Yeah. So you're learning from the veterans.
Right, exactly.
And did you guys encounter any resistance those first?
Just very shallow resistance. Then when we got to it, one of the big battles was at Conical Hill. Conical Hill, boy, that's when they had set up all these artillery. They had a lot of artillery and the machine gun placements, and that was really tough. And so when you're dug in, they know. The Japanese knew where everybody was, because they had everything zeroed in. And so then they start firing this artillery at you. And that's just scary, because there's nothing you can do about that. You don't know where it's coming from, and you don't see anybody. And the only thing that saved us is that their artillery pieces were pretty well worn. And so consequently, the rifling in the pieces were worn out. So instead of when the shell left the muzzle, instead of spinning, the shell would flop end over end, and you could hear it coming, zoop, zoop, zoop. And so when they landed on the back, they wouldn't go off. It's the only time they landed, they had to land on the nose. And so that's what saved us, because a lot of them did not go off.
Yeah, you can't avoid it.
No.
If it's aimed at you. And Okinawa was their last stand before the main island of Japan. So
right.
It turned out to be, as they say, the bloodiest battle in the Pacific.
It was very bloody, yes.
And I understand that once resistance was met, gaining ground didn't happen rapidly. You guys if we moved up 1,000 yards, that was just amazing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because see, I don't know if you've seen that movie, that documentary about all the caves and stuff that they had already prepared, and so there was several lines of resistance. The first one was what they called the Shuri line, and then if you got past that, then there was another section, and then there was a third one. So there was 3 different lines of resistance that they had set up, and so you had to get through all 3 of those before you finally they were at the end of the island. And not knowing where they were, above ground, below ground.
No, because see, right. Yeah, a lot of the things they were so well camouflaged that, like for example, the artillery pieces, they were in these caves, and they were set up like on rails, so they could just move them out to the front, fire, and then move them on back. And so when our artillery and even some of the ships would fire, it couldn't knock them out.
Even if they were aimed at them,
that's right.
Because they were. So you were about 18 years old.
Right.
A few months prior, you're in high school, and now you're fighting for your life. Can you sort of explain or talk about, did you have any thoughts or feelings about that? And were you concerned that you wouldn't make it back home?
Oh, well, absolutely. I was thinking, well, when I go in, or it would depend where I'm going to go. you know, you don't know if you're going to make it or not. And the main thing you think about, and most of the guys, same thing, they think about their mom, how the mom is going to take it if something happens. You always think about the dad, but for some reason, the dad seems to be able to be stronger in that point. And but you always think, yeah, if something happens to me, I don't know how my mom, because my mom had already lost 2 girls, and my oldest brother was the only, he'd be the only one left, and so yeah, that went through my mind, absolutely.
Did you experience any close calls?
Oh yes. Well, that one where we had to get those guys out, you couldn't get any closer than that. But then also when they're firing at you, and also during our artillery attack. In fact, that one right in particular, right there in Conical Hill, there was one guy in the foxhole right in front of me. Well, the shell hit. It didn't hit him, but hit right in front of the foxhole and blew him right out of the concussion just blew him right out of the hole. It didn't hurt him physically, but mentally he went out of it. Yeah, we never saw him again. Yeah.
And how far in front of you was?
Oh, he could only have been about 10, 12 feet in front of me.
Yeah. So fighting was constant.
Oh yeah, constant.
Day out.
Right.
What about during the night?
Yeah, that's the thing. So you dig in there, and then because I always seem to be about 3 in one area, and so we take turns staying awake. You know, have one guy stay awake for a couple hours, and then wake up the other guy, and then so you get some sleep. So you would take turns watching over, because yeah, the Japanese, you know, had so many different tricks. For example, and at first when I used to see these little piles of rock along the, the field there, these little piles of rocks, I said, I don't know what the heck those are for. Well, at night, even when the flares would go up, and you see the pile, you could swear it was somebody crawling. It looked like somebody, they asked what they set them up. So you would fire at those rocks, and they would give you away your position.
So they'd play a lot of mental games
right.
with you too.
Yeah.
Were you able to get any sleep?
Oh, yeah, not a whole lot, but yes, we did get some sleep.
And talk about the elements, the weather. Was it hot? Was it humid?
Well, we were there when the monsoon hit, and it rained for 15 days straight, day and night without stopping. So consequently, the mud was 3 or 4 foot deep, so nothing could move. None of the tanks, trucks, nothing. And so the supplies had to be brought up. The guys would go down and by hand had to carry everything up, water, ammunition, everything, food, everything had to be hauled up by hand because nothing would move. And in fact, there was one guy in our company, he was always stationed at headquarters, and so it was the first time that he had to come up and bring something up. And his last name was Larson. And so since it was his first time up to the front line, they nicknamed him Combat Larson. He hated that. He just hated it, because from then on, that's all they knew him by. In fact, they wouldn't name him his last name, they just called him Combat.
So you guys stayed wet.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. In fact, the hardest thing is when your feet are constantly wet, and you get all this fungus and stuff between your toes and everything. And so the captain, what he did, he radioed to the headquarters, see if they would send us up some dry socks. Well, you know what they sent up? Was oil and patches to keep our rifles dry, because that's more important.
Sure, it would have been nice to have a pair of dry socks.
It sure would.
Probably wouldn't have lasted long. But. So can you tell me about any of the other sort of inconveniences, or there weren't a lot of luxuries, if any.
No,
that
well,
we know
well,
of today.
the food, of course, we mainly had what they call K rations, which are you had to dehydrate them, and then they had a lot of stuff was canned, and the only way you could heat it is that some of the explosives that we had was called preparation C, I think, and it looked just like a cube of butter because it was yellow and very explosive. And the only way it could go off, you had to use a lighter, because that's what they used in the knapsacks. And so if you break off a little chunk of that, everybody had one in their pocket. You break off a chunk and you light it. It was just like a blowtorch. It wouldn't explode. It would just burn it with high heat. So that's how you could heat your coffee or your food. Put it in your canteen cup, and then put it right over that fire. And that's how that's the heat you would get from that.
Had to improvise.
Yeah, it was really something. At first time I saw him do that, I said, that thing's going to blow up. No, it doesn't explode.
So how long were you on Okinawa in total, from when you landed until when
well, there in middle of April till last part of June. And so they got the reason we left the island is that they reported that this hurricane was coming, and so they didn't want us to stay on the island, so they boarded us on these LSTs, and the LSTs are equipped to carry tanks and trucks and everything like that. So they boarded on it, but there wasn't any tanks or trucks or anything. These things were empty. So we rode that hurricane out there for 3 days. I mean, those ships were bounced around there like corks. And they couldn't prepare any food. All they had was boxes of soda crackers down at the bottom, and so that's all you'd have. And this buddy of mine, his name was Candy. We called him Candy, but his last name was Candelaria. They would call him Candy. He was from Los Angeles. Man, that poor guy was sick, really sick. About the second day, because what he'd do, at least he would fight it. He'd go down and get 2 handfuls of crackers, eat them, and then throw up on the other side. He kept going round and around. About the second day, I told him, you know what, Candy, what? So you're going to die, I told him. He says, I wish I would. He looked like he was about ready to jump overboard. And so I don't know what made me think of that. I opened up my duffel bag, and I had a can of chile jalapenos that my mother had sent me. I had never opened when they were there. So I thought, give me your canteen cup. And I got the opener, and I poured the juice of that hot chili in his cup. He said, here, drink this. He was willing to do anything. He drank. The next day he was fine. I guess that chili hit his stomach and put him in shock, and he was fine the next day. I'll never forget that.
You found the cure for motion sickness. So you guys left in the end of June. When did the battle end? When did you guys take the island?
Well, it was, I think the Japanese finally surrendered in late June. Oh, one thing, when like I say, when the battles were over, then what they do is they take all the division, they form a skirmish line all the way across the island and go back and mop up all resistance that might be there. So we had a fellow in our outfit who, God, he had been in the Battle of the Aleutians with another outfit. Then he'd been in Leyte, and he'd been in invasion of Okinawa. So he had been in 3 battles, He was a real vet. And he told the captain, he says, hey, why don't you go ahead and send me back? He says, I have a funny feeling about this. And the captain says, hey, we'll be back in camp in 3 days, Well, one early morning, I guess he went to do his business in the brush. When he came out, one of our own men shot him and killed him, thinking he was you saw the body coming out and killed. That was just terrible. And then the guy that shot him, I don't know where they took him because we never saw him again.
So did you guys have to do any sort of searching in caves, looking for the enemy and?
Well, yeah, because there was caves all over the place, and in one particular day, I remember, we saw this squad of guys coming up, and they had satchel charges on them, and there was a cave over to our left, and so in fact, this guy that was one of them, he used to live right in that about 3 blocks from here. His name was Oscar, and in fact he just died here this last year. But he threw that satchel charge in that cave, thinking there were just enemy soldiers in there. But no, it was that's where they were storing a lot of the ammo in there. So that cave just blew up. That whole hill just blew out. Lucky thing we were over to the side, because these giant rocks and everything. It killed all of that guys in that squad except that one guy. He's the one who survived, and the only reason they found him, his hand was sticking out of the rocks right there.
They all got covered.
Covered, yeah. God, I saw it because I was, good thing I wasn't in front of it, I was on the side, but I could see all the huge rocks that blew up. Yeah, because it was an ammo dump, and that whole hill just went. Because they didn't realize that what was in there.
They didn't search inside.
All right.
They just tried to close the cave.
Yeah.
Did you experience any bonsai attacks?
Yes. The Japanese were good for that. And they generally do that early in the evening, and
as the sun's going down.
Yeah, they'd come and let's just tell you, this guy that was a baseball player, he'd get up on the side like that, and they'd toss him the grenades, and he was the one who was throwing them. He just tossed them, and I still remember that they would holler, "American pig die." That was what they would say. They'd be hollering that, "American pig die," and and the thing is, it seemed up to me like it was so foolish because they didn't have a chance. I mean, we killed a lot of enemy soldiers that way because there's no way they were going to get through our lines like that. It was a tactic that I think eventually they gave up on.
Because they would just rush forward.
Just right. I guess they knew they were going to get it or something. I don't know.
I understand they thought it was more honorable to die.
Oh, absolutely. Right. That's why even the generals and everything all come here at Cary before it ended, because they weren't about to be captured.
Right. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you said that you were on Okinawa for about a month before you became a medic, or
yeah,
to the medical?
About that, yes.
Okay. So once you get your medical tools, you already mentioned that the instance where you guys carried the 3 guys out of there, but what other type of injuries and whatnot did you have to work on?
Well,
what type of wounds did
the
you
one that the guy was shot, he was shot through the lung, and it didn't hit any other vital parts because it went through the lung, because when I got to him, you could hear the air, going in and out. So it just tore off, he had that ponchos, those rubberized ponchos, and so we put a patch on the front and then one in the back and bandaged him up to stop the air from going in and out. And so I think he survived that because they took him off to the hospital. But I don't know what they do at the hospital for him, but I think that saved him, really.
So you had to do a lot of improvising.
You're right.
A lot of common sense or
right. Yeah, I had a lot of a lot of broken bones. Set up set up tourniquets, for the wounds. And that was very common, and splints for the broken bones.
And were you working by yourself, or did you have like?
No, well, the other guys would, the other fellows, they weren't medics, but the other guys would help me out with it, sure.
Yeah. And you said that you'd worked in a vet hospital before,
Yeah.
so you've seen blood, but
Right.
how would this compare to your experience in the?
Well, really no direct experience, but I don't know. In fact, see, one thing, basically before the other medics got hurt, I used to help them out, and so that's basically where I experienced what they were doing and how they handled it, and because we had 3 medics at one time, and we lost all 3 of them.
Did that make you put you a bit more on edge, knowing that you guys were sort of a target?
No, we weren't any more of a target than anybody else.
Okay. If you had to estimate, how many wounded would you say that you attended to, that you worked on?
Gee whiz. Quite a few, but I can't recall what number it would be. Quite a few. We had a lot of, mainly shrapnel wounds more than bullet wounds, because the Japanese used a lot of mortars. Besides artillery, they used a lot of mortars, and one of the small mortars that they call knee mortars. I don't know why they call them knee mortars, because they don't fire them from the knee, but because those things were really accurate for them. They could probably put one of those things in your back pocket, and so they got a lot of wounds from that.
Did any of your close friends get hit that you had to?
Oh yes. In fact, this fellow was here. He lives here in El Cajon. He got wounded twice, but there were wounds that they were able to, because they sent him to the hospital, but then he would be back, and he got wounded again, and he came back twice from his wounds. So they weren't real serious wounds, but enough he got the Purple Heart from him.
Yeah, not enough to get the ticket home. Though,
right? No.
And the movie Hacksaw Ridge is based on
right.
Battle of Okinawa.
Right.
Have you seen that?
Yeah, I've seen the movie. Yes. Well,
how does that represent?
Well, Hollywood kind of overdoes it.
It's a bit of a.
Yeah, it was. In fact, we were very close to Hacksaw Ridge, and again, there was a lot of. I never knew that particular medic that did all that. In fact, he got the Congressional Medal of Honor for that. No, I never knew him or saw him, but we were in close proximity to where he was.
And that got its nickname based on all the casualties that occurred there, or was that name established before?
What the
Hacksaw Ridge?
I don't know why they named it that. I really don't know.
Was that something that you guys would use while you were over there, or do you think that?
No, in fact, I know. I never knew it as Hacksaw Ridge, so. Because they were other places were what they called escarpments. They were high hills up there, and they were, and of course the enemy knew that it would be difficult to climb up there. So that's where they had a lot of their emplacements were especially for machine gun emplacements, because it was difficult. It was difficult. It wasn't so stiff that you couldn't climb it, but it was a slope, and they called these and that's what term they use, escarpments.
At any point, did it become too much for you? Working on wounded soldiers and
You know what? No, a lot of people came down with what they call battle fatigue, and I never experienced that. Really, I was lucky with that. It didn't bother me, but I've seen quite a few fellows that it did. Just a strain, and of course lack of sleep, it really hurts too, and the strain of experiencing through the artillery and all that. Well, a lot of people it really affected them.
And did any of your close friends get killed over there?
Well, I wouldn't say they were real close friends, but they're people that I knew that in the company, yes.
That you cared about.
Right.
How difficult is that to lose those guys?
Well, it is tough because some of the guys that you went right through all through your training with, so you were fairly close, even though they weren't relatives. You actually become almost like brothers.
Yeah. You guys are going through it all together.
Right.
But I wouldn't imagine there's probably much time for mourning.
Not much time for that. No.
Yeah. No. You think about those guys ever?
Oh yeah, because in fact, some of those guys that I trained with, all of them are gone. In fact, there was one that I used to see up in Fresno. He used to raise raisin grapes, so I'd go up there and spend a few days with him. And I think the property was his dad's at first, and then when his dad passed away, he took it over. So he had a lot of vineyards there, but those were all raisin grapes. And so I lost him, because I lost my friend over here in El Cajon, and I lost my the sergeant that I was with. He was from Minnesota. He just passed away here about 2 months ago. And in fact, we had reunions. Our division had reunions every year in a different city, mainly in the east, like Chicago, Minneapolis. We had a lot of them in Salt Lake City, Kansas City. We've had 2 in California. The very first one that I went to was in Fresno. And that was, I can't even remember what year it was. But here 3 years ago, we had it the first time in San Diego. But this last year was the very last one, which was in Washington, D.C. No, it was in Minneapolis. It was the very last one. So what they're doing now is they're going to send out this other organization that kind of took over, which is an outfit in Salt Lake City at Fort Douglas. And I think they call them the 96 ARCOM. And so they wear our patch. They wear our 96 patch. And so they kind of took over the duties, and which is what they'll do is they'll send out notice of when we're meeting in Salt Lake, and anybody who wants to go, just go, but nothing that's really organized. Because before, when it was well organized, we had tours and different banquets, and it really was well organized. They've done away with that.
Now, you mentioned while you were over there fighting, you think about your parents, your mother specifically, mm-hmm. and what she would think if anything happened to you. Were you able to write letters at all?
Oh yes, yeah, you could write that, but you could never tell them where you were.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you receive letters?
Oh yes.
Do you remember anything that you?
No, just basically, because I actually wrote it to my dad, because he's the one that could read English, and just really telling him that everything was doing okay. Everything was fine, everything was okay. And that's really what he wanted to hear too.
You just wanted to put him at ease.
Yeah,
right.
Right.
You didn't want to make him worry.
Right.
Now, are you a religious man?
Yes.
So, would you pray a lot?
Well, I pray a lot, but I'm Catholic, and my brother, when I got back, he had already been a Knight of Columbus for quite a few years. Mm-hmm. So he asked me if I wanted to join. In fact, I said, I don't even know anything about this outfit, you know. So he told me about it. So I joined the Knights of Columbus back in must have been about 1947. And so I've been a Knight all those years. So there's the first three that you go through, first, second, and third degree. And then I don't remember what year it was, but I became a fourth degree Knight, and that's the ones who have the whole outfit, you know. And they happened to have it here in Balboa Park. It was called an international degree because a lot of the Knights from Mexico came and made their fourth degree here, so it was an international degree. And right now, it was at my council, it was just Cabrillo Council. I'm the oldest past living Knight.
Is that right?
Because I was a Grand Knight there in 1965. And so all the other past Grand Knights are all gone. I'm the only one left. It's amazing.
Now, the Bronze Star that you received, what was that?
That was for that deal that we did in saving those guys there.
The three guys.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you had to say what was one of the toughest days for you on Okinawa?
Well, I think one time, during the monsoon, when you're just soaking wet, and so I think it was 3 or 4 of the guys. What they did, they tried to dig a cave just to get stay out of the rain, and so they got into this cave, and someone was just sitting on their helmets. Well, that thing caved in, because it had no support for it, and with all that moisture and everything, pretty soon the thing caved in, and boy, one of them got a broken back from that, and so we had to dig them out of there because they were buried in that cave, so we had to dig those guys out of there, and like I said, one of them was really, really hurt bad, and I don't know whatever happened to him because I think it broke his back.
Are there any other memories that stick out in your mind from your time on Okinawa that we haven't talked about?
One time I was just sitting on the edge of my foxhole because my feet in the water, and this guy comes walking up to me, and I kept looking at him. I said, "Hey, is that you, Louis?" I said, "Yeah." It was a guy that I had gone to school with here. Dick Greville was his name, and I hadn't seen him because it was a different company, and so how he happened to be coming up that way, I don't even know. But so we sat there, and then he says, "Hey," he says, "Would a nice T-bone steak go good right now?" Yeah, right.
It had been a while since you had had
That's right.
decent food, huh?
See, after the war ended, because we were on the island of Mindoro, and getting prepared for the invasion of Japan, we were taking in replacements, and so when the war ended, because the way they did it, they had what they call a point system, and so the higher point guys naturally were going to go home first, and at that time the 86th Division had gone to Europe, but then the war ended there, so they sent them back to the Pacific, so they were going to be part of the invasion of Japan. So then what they did was they took the high point guys from the 86th and the high point guys of the 96th, and they came back as one division, but they came back as the 96th, even though they were combined. So then what they did with the rest of us guys, we joined the 86th in Manila. They sent us to Manila. And when when after those guys left, we were still on the island of Mindoro, and we had a first aid station there because there was a trucking outfit that was getting all the equipment that was still on Mindoro, putting them on barges, and dumping it out at sea. Everything was going on. They just dumped everything out there, and so we had to be there in case somebody got hurt, you know. So after they got through, there was a little ship, LCI. It was there on the dock, and there was a corpsman there that I got friendly with. So he used to invite me over on Sundays because they have chicken on Sundays on board ship. So I'd go eat with him. So then finally one day he came over and says, "Louis," he says, "you know what? We're leaving tomorrow." I said, "What about us?" "I don't know about you guys, but we're going." And so there was just the doctor and 3 of his medics left. Just the 4 of us. Nobody else. Everybody was gone. And I told the captain, "God damn, does anybody know we're here?" He says, "I sure hope so." We didn't have a radio or anything for communication. So we were there about almost a week, all by ourselves. And we were running out of food and everything. Pretty soon here comes a little ship coming there, picked us up, and took us to Manila. So
start getting a little nervous.
Oh yeah. So when we got there, the guys in the Jeep, they picked me up, and it was already getting pretty late in the afternoon, I remember. And we went to this old abandoned airfield. And the guy says, "Okay," he says, "you wait here, soldier." He says, "Somebody will pick you up here." And they took off. So all of a sudden, pretty soon it got dark, pitch dark. And I said, "God damn, who the heck's going to pick me up?" He was, "I don't even know I'm here." I was really getting worried because I didn't even know where I was. I was here by myself. Pretty soon I see these 2 little lights coming, you know, and the guys in the Jeep. And they were from a dispensary. From this little, they were stationed in a little town called Marikina. So they come in and they picked me up, and they took me over to that dispensary. And the sergeant, the first time I ever met him, you know, his name was Usher, I think it was his last name. And so he went and showed me where I was going to bunk and everything. After I was there a while, he comes and he says, "The captain wants to meet you." The fellow in charge of the dispensary. Yeah, his name was Dr. Stevens. So I walked in his tent and I saluted him and everything. And he said, and he was real casual, you know, being a medical doctor and everything. He was real strong military, okay? So he says, "Sit down, soldier." So I sat down. He tells me, "When's the last time you had a cold beer?" "Gee whiz, Captain." I says, "I think that's not since I left the States." Well, he said, "Open up that Marmite can and help yourself." He had cold beer in this refrigerated deal there. So let me have a cold beer, you know. And I couldn't believe it. It's funny. He says, "Tell me, by the way," he says, "what's your rank?" I says, "PFC." "PFC? Well, how long have you been in the Army?" And I told him, "Almost 2 years." "Well," he says, "tomorrow you're a corporal." And then later on, about later, he gave me my sergeant's stripes. So, see what happened when I got transferred to the medical corps, I never met my officer, my medical officer. Never came up there. I never even knew who he was, and I bet he didn't even know who I was. So actually, my captain was the captain of the Company E, Captain Wilcox. To me, he was my officer. He's the only one I really knew. So this guy, so as far as getting a raise in rank, well, forget it. Nobody knew who you were.
How would you have gotten it? So going back to that night that you had to carry those 3 guys out,
right.
How far would you say that you had to travel? How far did you have to transport them through the jungle?
I would say from that Wilmar Knoll to that knoll where we picked them up, I would say close to 100, 150 yards. Because those knolls were pretty well separated. And so that's about, I would estimate, really can't think of it exactly right now, but I would estimate it between 100 and 150 yards.
And two of them walked.
Yeah,
you
two
said
were walking.
wounded, and the other you had to carry out.
Yeah.
Now, did you guys have passwords at nighttime?
Oh yeah, yeah. And the passwords always had the letter L in them because the Japanese can't pronounce the letter L.
And they would change daily?
Oh yeah, well not daily, but after a few days they would pass out on different passwords. Yeah.
Did you guys have any of the enemy try to sneak in? Or?
Oh yeah, yeah. At night they try to infiltrate the lines. Yes.
But you could obviously tell that they
Oh
were
yeah. In fact, there's one time this, I guess it must have been an officer. He comes there and he happened to be he fell into this guy's foxhole, and the guy didn't have a chance to get his weapon, so he killed him by hitting him with his helmet. He beat him to death with his helmet. Yeah.
And did you guys take any prisoners?
Yes, yes. And when you get to prison, of course, you can't keep them. You pass them on to another outfit that, I don't know, in fact, I don't know what they do with them. I guess they take them back to interrogate them.
Did you ever experience any hand-to-hand combat?
No.
So as you guys are getting ready, preparing for the invasion of mainland Japan,
right.
And eventually the war ends.
Right.
Bombs are dropped. Japan surrenders.
Right.
When do you catch word of this happening? When did you
I guess I guess right after the second bomb went off is when Hirohito finally. Because see, the military didn't want to surrender. Yeah, Hirohito finally said enough is enough, and he's the one that. Well, he had the last word, and so he said, "No, this is it." And so, and I don't know exactly what day it was, but that's what they call it, the spirit of 45. Well, it must have been around the 10th or something like that.
Yeah, August 12th.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, and so. I guess they must have, in fact, I don't know how the word got to us because everything had to be by radio. And so they had these big mics all over the company, you know, and they announced it over these mics that the war had ended. All right, we're going home, you know. That's the first thing you think about. Because it was quite a while before I actually went home, because I was sent up to Manila, spent almost a year there.
Could you imagine having to invade Japan and go through?
Well, because you think about it, it's just going to be another regular invasion. But after I got home, I happened to get the plans that the U.S. government had for the invasion of Japan, and it showed all the fortifications and stuff that the Japanese had. We would have lost. Can't imagine. First of all, it says we would have lost all the Marine Corps. All Marine Corps would have been lost because they don't have that many divisions. And then I don't know how many Army divisions would have been lost. The Navy really caught heck because they had these kamikaze planes prepared just for that, to go after the Navy ships. And so it would have just been horrendous, terrible. So, you know, there's been a lot of criticism over the dropping of those two bombs, but people don't realize how many lives were actually saved on both sides.
Yeah, it took a lot of lives, but it also saved.
Oh yes, it would have been terrible, yeah.
So you were in Manila for about a year, you said?
Almost a year, yeah.
And how was life on Manila?
It was nice. Yeah. Very nice. The people are very, very friendly, yeah. So.
Grateful?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely, yeah. because they suffered a lot during the invasion of their country. And you know, whenever I used to travel, right there at our, see, the thing is, I was the last medic to report to that dispensary. So whenever they needed a medic somewhere else, I was the one that had to go. So for a while I was stationed with an MP outfit there in the town of Marikina. And they were stationed at this old Spanish jail. I think they must have been built back in the 1700s or something. It was all real, that block made out of those big cement blocks, you know. And they had a dungeon, because they had the cells and everything like that. But they had a dungeon, and so whenever they bring in the guys that were all intoxicated, that's where they'd put them down there in that dungeon. I think there were rats in there too. But anyhow.
Let them sober up.
Yeah. So, well, you know, in case there was an accident, that, you know, I had to go with them. So when I don't recall how long I was with them. So I goes back to the dispensary, and then they needed somebody at quartermaster. That's where they keep all the food and everything like that. So I had a aid station there, and I got in friends with the other guys that used to handle stuff like that. So, and I could keep my lights on all night, but there it was 10 o'clock with lights out. So these guys would do it. They'd come over to my place at night and bring all the food for making sandwiches, you know, and I had the beer. So we just about partied just about every night.
Not a bad time.
No.
So besides carrying extra morphine, what other tools and supplies and materials did you carry as a medic to?
Well, a lot of bandages, and what do you call it, pads, a lot of pads that you could use. That you, I guess they call them compression pads. That you can put on the wound, and had a lot of those. Yeah, I had about 4 big bags of stuff that I had to carry, and.
How much would you say your pack weighed?
I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 pounds apiece. Because most of that stuff that was in there was pretty light. Yeah.
It's not heavy equipment.
No.
Just a lot of it.
Yeah.
And just trying to get an idea of you know, you're trying to concentrate, trying to treat a wounded soldier while there's I'm assuming a lot of chaos going on around you. How are you able to focus in on the job that you need to do when you know that?
Well, you just kind of block everything out. You just concentrate on what you have to do, and hopefully you're not going to join them.
I imagine you provide a lot of comfort for those guys who are wounded. Just being there, knowing that you're tending to them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they because when one guy gets wounded, that's the first word you hear. They call medic or doc. And they didn't call me medic, they call me doc. They all call you doc, and that's the term they use. And yeah, you hear that a lot.
And were there any men that you just weren't able to treat or able to
that didn't survive? No, nobody actually died in my arms that I can think of. No. But I was very fortunate that way.
And your main mission or objective is to treat the wounds the best you can to get them back to the main hospital.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And would there be other soldiers that would transport them back, or would that also be a job of yours?
No, somebody else would take care of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So once your time was up in Manila, took a ship back to the States?
Yes.
Where did you?
We landed in San Francisco.
Okay. see. You came under the bridge?
Yeah, boy, yeah. It's a beautiful sight when you see that Golden Gate, man. You think you're in heaven. Yeah, and the thing is, from there, they sent us for discharge at Camp Beale, which is close to Sacramento. And the funny thing is that the captain said, okay, he says, we're going to, they gave you so much money. He says, you can go home. He says, in a couple of weeks, you guys come back to get your permanent discharge. I said, Captain, I says, isn't that kind of foolish? Why should we make our trip all the way? I live in San Diego, I told him, and then come all the way back? Why can't you just discharge us now? He kept thinking, yeah, why not? I don't know what took him so long to think about that one. Hey, Willikers. So he finally gave us our discharge and our $500 or whatever he gave. And so I had to go catch the train in San Francisco to come home. Well, the American Legion, because they were those were World War I veterans, that used to be a big thing. Because I still remember when sometimes they had the conventions here in San Diego, and the place would be loaded with legionnaires. You know? So it just so happened when I got on that train, the convention, American Legion convention, had just broken up. So that train was just loaded with those World War I veterans, you know. So I was sitting in my regular lounge car there, and so I'm going to go back and get me a beer. So I go back to the lounge, and the lounge is loaded with legionnaires there. So the minute I walk in, hey, Sergeant, come on, sit down here. I never left that thing till I got to San Diego.
Did a bit of drinking on the way there?
It's a little bit.
And when you arrived home?
Oh, yes. I got home, of course, we landed right here at San Diego Depot, and I caught a cab and took the cab. Well, when the cab got in front of the house, I saw my dad was standing in the porch. Well, when he saw the cab, I guess he knew that was me. So he didn't come out. He went back into the house, I guess to tell my mom that I was there, you know. So I got there, of course, my mom went bananas, you know, and just created me. And one thing, my dad, you know, he had worked all these years as a cook, and while he was working in Agua Caliente, the cooks there mainly were French cook chefs, you know. So they had given him a bottle of French champagne. This was years back, you know, a bottle of champagne. But he never opened it. He always, and in that time, my folks never owned a house. They rented. So every so many years, they'd move somewhere else. Well, here goes that bottle of champagne. Yeah. So I thought to myself, I wonder when my dad's going to open that champagne. So when my brother got married, I thought, sure, he's going to open it there. And in fact, I asked him, Dad, I said, are you going to open that bottle of champagne for my brother's wedding? That's not the time, he says. He just said, that's not the time. But that day that I got home, he goes over to the cupboard. This is the time. He opened that bottle of champagne. And it so happened a friend of mine, his name is Hank Contreras, he happened to come over that day. So he was there when my dad opened that bottle. Man, you know, I don't really care for champagne, but that bottle, I couldn't believe. After all those years, that thing was something else. Yeah, he poured it all out to my mom and him, and we drank that whole bottle right there. Yeah, I still remember he said, this is the time.
That must have felt pretty good.
My son is home.
And did you ever talk to your parents or your brother about what you had been through?
No, at the time, not very much. In fact, you know, you always kind of think of the good times. You know, so I never tell them what I went through, not even to my brother. I never said anything. The only time that we actually start talking that to our family is when we started going to the reunions, because the guys making presentations, they're the ones that emphasize. Hey, go ahead and talk to your family what you went through. Somebody's got to know all the problems and things that you went through, and let them know, so it gets around. So they emphasize that we open up. Until then, I didn't do that.
And you mentioned that you didn't really experience any battle fatigue or anything like that, but did you have any what they call PTSD now?
Well, you know, at the time that we were experiencing that saving those 3 guys, when people have asked me, said, "Were you scared at the time?" No, I don't remember being scared at all. I think about it now and just think of what could have happened. That's when it bothers me now. Hey, after all these years, guys, damn, if those Japs would have known who we were, that would have been it.
You said they turned around and started.
Yeah, they started talking to us. Yeah, because it was pitch dark, so they couldn't actually see us. They could hear our movements around, but they actually couldn't see us. And when that flare gave off, we were already away from their sight. Because if that flare would have gone on, well, they were right there. That would have been it.
And was it difficult for you to start opening up to your family?
No, after a while, no, it wasn't too much, because, you know, I didn't really tell them anything drastic, you know. I just mainly it was some of the basic things that we've gone through the experience, you know.
So after you got discharged, after you returned home, did you start working? Did you
Yeah,
get a job?
yeah. See, jobs were really hard to get for the military guys that came home. The jobs were very, very scarce. It just so happened that my brother was working at this rendering plant, and he told me, well, would you like to go to work there? I said, I'll go to work anywhere, you know. So he talked to one of the bosses, and so I started working there just kind of part-time. And then later on, I got on full-time there. In fact, I was working there when I met my wife. And in fact, I worked there for quite a few years, even after we were married. And so, in the meantime, I had been going to San Diego State. See, I was a chemistry, at first I was a chemistry major. That was my major, chemistry. And so I went about 3 years at San Diego State, and that's when my wife got sick. So I had to drop out. So, and once in a while, in the summer, I might take a summer course or like that. But I couldn't go full time. So back in 1965, I was working for Westgate Tuna Packing Company. See, in those years, we had a lot of tuna canneries on the bay here. I had quite a few, about 6 or 7 canneries. Well, I was working for one called Westgate. And so one day this fellow come to me and said, "Hey, Louis," says, "you know, there's an outfit in Ensenada that's looking for somebody to run their chili dehydrating plant, but the person has to be bilingual." He says, why don't you apply for that?" So I did, and I got the job. It was a good job there in Ensenada. So I worked there for about 3 years until the Mexican government is funny about Americans working in Mexico, you know. So they kept reducing my visas, you know. So I knew eventually we were going to eliminate all the guys. So I said, I better come home. So in the meantime, my son was going to USD, University of San Diego. So after I got home, he come and told me one day, he said, "You know what? They're giving out some scholarships out there at the school." He said, "Dad, why don't you apply for one?" Yeah, I said, "Well, who's going to feed us, you know?" So I applied for the scholarship, and they granted me one. But I didn't go to USD. They sent me to UCSD at Revelle College, toughest school in the country. It's a tough school. So I go up there, and I'm still a chemistry major, right? So they give me one biology class. and I had never taken any biology. That was the first biology class I'd ever had. And so the provost of the college, I still remember his name, Dr. Saltman, really a nice guy. He was a professor of that class, and he was always the provost also. So I went to see him one day and told him, well, you know what, doctor, I'm thinking of going into education. He says, as a chemistry teacher, he told me. I said, well, yeah, that's my major. He said, I tell you what you do. He says, go over to San Diego City Schools Administration Building and ask them when the last time they hired a chemistry teacher, because he was a biologist. He says, they only hire one. And I said, when somebody dies, he tells me. Well, what am I supposed to do? Change your major to biology, he tells me. That'll give you a whole, many doors to open. You know? I said, Doc, I said, this is the only biology class I ever had. You know, I'm no young guy, I told him. I'd had to take all my lower division and all my upper division classes. And that's a lot of classes, units that I don't have time for. Especially here, I told him. So he said, I'll tell you what you do. He gave me the name of the chairman of the biology department at USD, because he knew him, see. He said, go over and talk to him, see what he can do for you. This Dr. Salman he is a jewel. I really like this guy. So I went over there. I said, yeah, I'll set you up. You know that I did all my lower and upper division biology in 1 year.
All right.
I lived at the school. God, I don't recommend that to anybody, not even my worst enemy. Oh, that was horrible.
It worked hard for a year, but
it worked out.
It
well, it was nice because, see, my degree major was biology then, and a lower division, a minor in chemistry and math. So when I applied for a job at the school system, I had no problem getting a job, especially being bilingual too.
I was going to ask you too, given your background, your ancestry, did you experience any discrimination in the Army at all?
No. Of course, they never sent me to the South, so I was never I was never in Texas. But no, I can really say that. The only thing that possibly I keep thinking about when I applied for that Air Force, I kind of feel that might have been it, because I passed all the tests, all my physical and all the mental tests, and it still was rejected, and they never give you a reason why.
There's no other explanation.
No.
Yeah. When people call you a hero, how do you respond?
Oh no. I'm sorry, but the heroes are back there that didn't come back. They're the real ones, right?
And if you had any advice for my generation, future generations, your future great grandkids, what would you offer?
I think I still think that there should be a kind of mandatory military duty for young people. I think it's a great experience for all. They don't have to make a career out of it, but just make it a required 3 or 4 year requirement to go through the military training. I think it's not only physically but mentally a sound choice.
And is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, except Zach, I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity to express my experiences. And I hope that whatever I say or whatever I've done, it might be beneficial to somebody else.
Well, the honor is all mine. I want to thank you for the opportunity, and I want to thank you for your service and fighting for my freedom, making sure that it's possible today. So thank you very much.
Okay, very much.